Ever had one of those work days where you're putting in a ton of effort, but somehow walk away feeling
Oh,
energized?
absolutely. Or the flip side, right.
Yeah.
Totally wiped out by tasks that weren't even, like, that demanded.
Exactly. Let's unpack this because today on the deep dive, we're tackling a framework that helps explain exactly this. It's called the Job Demands Resources Model, or JDR for short.
Hmm.
So right up front, I think the core takeaway is that how we feel at work often boils down to the balance between what's pulling us down the demands and what's lifting us up the resources.
Exactly. And to really get to the heart of this, we're looking at well, a pretty significant piece of research, a meta-analytic review of longitudinal studies on the JDR model.
Okay.
This is published in Work and Stress. And what makes this so valuable is that it doesn't just give us a snapshot. It tracks these factors over time, which
Yeah.
is, essential for understanding what causes what.
Absolutely. So for you, our listener who's always eager to learn, our goal today is to really understand this JDR model. What are the main ideas?
Yeah.
What does the evidence tell us, especially when we see how things develop over time? And crucially, what practical insights can we maybe take away to better understand our own work lives?
Hmm.
We're here to guide you, making sense of the research so you can apply it. And with us is our expert on the subject.
Hello. Happy to be here.
So in our conversation today, we'll start with the basics, what the JDR model is, then explore the key concepts, job demands, and resources.
Right.
From there, we'll look at how these relate to burnout and engagement, those crucial indicators of our well-being.
Definitely.
And then we'll really dig into what this recent analysis of studies that followed people over time has revealed. So where did this JDR model even originate?
Well, the JDR model was first introduced back in 2001, and its initial aim really was to shed light on what causes burnout.
Okay, burnout specifically.
Yeah. The central idea was that facing high job demands requires, sustained effort, and this prolonged effort leads to exhaustion.
Right.
Interestingly, the early model also suggested that a lack of job resources could get in the way of achieving work goals and sort of contribute to disengagement too.
So it started by focusing on what makes us feel, well, not so great at work.
Precisely. But as interest grew in the positive aspects of work psychology, the model expanded.
Oh.
Around 2004, the concept of work engagement was formally integrated as like a positive aspect of well-being.
Okay.
This allowed the JDR model to examine not only the pathogenic roots to burnout, but also the salutogenic mechanisms, the things that foster engagement and overall well-being.
Pathogenic and salutogenic, those are some interesting terms. So pathogenic is about what leads to negative health outcomes, like stress.
Right. The illness pathways.
And salutogenic is about what promotes health and thriving.
That's a very clear way to put it, yes. And the fundamental principle of the JDR model, as we understand it today, is that the different aspects of our jobs can generally be categorized into two main groups: job demands or job resources.
Right, the two buckets.
Exactly. And what's really insightful is that the model proposes this categorization holds true across a wide variety of different occupations.
Okay, so let's get down to specifics then. What exactly do we mean by these job demands?
So job demands are defined as the physical, social, or organizational aspects of your job that require you to put in sustained physical or mental effort.
Okay, sustained effort.
Yeah. And because of this ongoing effort, they're linked to certain physiological and psychological costs. They take a toll.
Like what kinds of things?
Think about things like tight deadlines, constant pressure to perform, maybe having to juggle conflicting responsibilities within a team, or simply having an overwhelming amount of work. That's what we mean by quantitative workload.
Right, those all definitely sound like they take a toll. But I've heard some talk about like good stress versus bad stress. Does the JDR model consider that?
It does, in a way. Researchers have made a distinction between challenging and hindering demands.
Challenging versus hindering. Okay.
Yeah. Challenging demands are those that, while they require effort, they also offer the potential for personal growth. They're often viewed as opportunities to learn and develop new skills.
Okay, like a tough but rewarding project.
Exactly. Hindering demands, on the other hand, tend to block personal growth. They're perceived more as obstacles or barriers that just, get in the way.
That makes a lot of sense. So a tight deadline on a project I'm really invested in might feel challenging, whereas dealing with endless bureaucratic hurdles just feels like hindering demand.
Exactly. Now, while this is a really valuable distinction, the meta-analysis we're focusing on today did point out that the studies they reviewed didn't have enough data to really fully explore these nuances longitudinally.
Got it. So that distinction is there, but maybe harder to track consistently over time in the existing research they looked at.
Right.
Okay. So demands are what tend to drain us. What about the things that give us energy, the job resources?
Job resources are the other side of the coin. These are the physical, psychological, social, or organizational aspects of your job that serve three key purposes.
Okay, what are they?
They help you achieve your work goals effectively. They lessen the negative impact of job demands and their associated costs.
The buffer effect.
Exactly. And they foster your personal growth and development.
Can you give us some concrete examples of these sort of energy boosters?
Absolutely. Think about having autonomy in your role.
Yeah.
The freedom to make decisions about how you carry out your work.
Right. Control over your work.
Yeah. Or the level of support you receive, maybe from your organization as a whole or from your direct supervisor. These are classic examples of job resources.
Okay, so we have demands that can lead to negative outcomes and resources that can lead to positive ones. What are the main well-being outcomes that the JDR model looks at?
The JDR model primarily focuses on two key aspects of employee well-being: burnout as the main negative indicator, and work engagement as the positive one.
Burnout, it's a term we hear a lot. How does the JDR model typically define it?
Well, within the JDR model, burnout is often understood through the lens of exhaustion.
Exhaustion.
Yeah. This refers to the feeling of being energetically depleted, resulting from being exposed to prolonged and intense strain, whether that strain is physical, emotional, or cognitive.
That feeling of being completely run down makes perfect sense. And the positive outcome is work engagement. What does that involve?
Work engagement is defined as a positive and fulfilling state of mind related to your work. It's characterized by three main aspects.
Vigor.
Yeah, which is a sense of energy and mental resilience while you're working. Then there's dedication, a feeling of enthusiasm, inspiration, pride in your job.
Okay.
And absorption, being deeply concentrated and engrossed in your tasks, kind of like being in the flow.
So feeling energetic, really caring about what you're doing, and being totally focused, that's engagement. I like that. So how do these demands and resources actually lead to burnout or engagement? What are the underlying mechanisms?
The JDR model proposes two main, relatively independent processes at play. First, we have the health impairment process.
Okay.
This suggests that when you consistently face high job demands over time, and crucially, you don't have enough resources to effectively deal with them,
Right.
you increase your risk of experiencing burnout and other negative outcomes, like health problems, or even thinking about leaving your job.
Okay, that seems pretty logical. Lots of pressure, not enough support leads to burnout. What's the other process?
The second is the motivational process. In this process, job resources play the crucial role in driving work engagement.
So resources fuel engagement.
Exactly. When you have resources available, they fuel your motivation, which in turn leads to more positive results for the organization, like better job performance and a stronger sense of commitment.
So resources give us that drive and connection to our work. And are these two processes completely separate, or do they interact?
Well, not entirely separate. The model also recognizes that a lack of job resources can directly contribute to feelings of burnout, even if the job demands aren't exceptionally high.
Okay, so low resources can be draining in themselves.
Yes. And, as we mentioned, resources can act as a buffer, helping to lessen the negative impact that high job demands have on burnout.
Right, the cushion effect again?
Think of it like having a strong support network that can help you get through a particularly stressful period at work. Figure 1 in the original study actually illustrates these relationships quite well.
Like having a really supportive team can make even crazy deadlines feel more manageable.
Precisely.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces connect. Now, the review we're focusing on specifically looks at longitudinal studies. Why is that such a key aspect? Why is tracking over time so important here?
That's a really important point. You see, the vast majority of earlier research on the JDR model was cross-sectional.
Meaning just one point in time.
Exactly. Data collected at just one point in time.
Well,
While these studies could show correlations, that certain job characteristics tend to occur alongside certain well-being outcomes, they couldn't really tell us about cause and effect.
right.
Or the direction of the relationship. For example, does having high demands cause burnout? Or does feeling burnt out perhaps make you perceive your job demands as being higher?
Right, the age-old question of which came first. Chicken or egg.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Longitudinal studies, which track variables over time by taking measurements at multiple points, are essential for understanding these causal links and the sequence of events.
Okay.
They allow researchers to see if changes in job demands and resources actually precede changes in well-being.
So this meta-analysis specifically looked at studies that followed people over a period to see how their job demands and resources influence their levels of burnout and engagement later on.
That's precisely the power of this research. This deep dive is based on a meta-analysis that pooled the findings from 74 separate longitudinal studies.
Wow, 74 studies. That's a lot of data.
It is. Essentially, they looked at the results of many similar studies to get a bigger, more reliable picture, allowing for a more robust understanding of the causal pathways within the JDR model.
So what were some of the main things they discovered when they analyzed all that data? Did they look at the quality of those studies first?
Yes, that was one of the first steps. They evaluated the methodological quality of those 74 studies, and they found, well, a considerable range in quality.
Okay.
About 29 of them, roughly 39%, were considered to be high quality based on specific criteria.
Like what kind of criteria?
Things like whether the study followed people for a good amount of time, the interval between measurements, if they measured things consistently using reliable questionnaires, the statistical analysis they used. Basically, were these studies designed well enough for us to trust their findings? Table 1 and Table 2 in the original paper detail these criteria.
That makes sense. Not all research methods are equally strong. And did they find that the quality mattered for the results?
Yes, that's a key point. They found that the goodness of fit of their models, think of it as how well the theoretical JDR model actually matches the real-world data from the studies, was indeed influenced by study quality. This suggests that the higher quality studies provided more precise and likely more dependable results.
Okay, so focusing on those studies is probably wise. What did these longitudinal studies, especially the higher quality ones, tell us about the fundamental ideas of the JDR model? Did they hold up when looking at changes over time?
Yes. For the most part, the core assumptions were supported by the longitudinal evidence. They found that experiencing high job demands over time does indeed lead to an increase in burnout later on.
Okay, hypothesis A confirmed.
Right. Similarly, having plenty of job resources over time does lead to higher levels of work engagement later.
Hypothesis B confirmed.
Yep. And a lack of job resources over time does contribute to increased burnout down the line.
Hypothesis C confirmed. Figure 3 in the paper shows this, right?
Correct. It illustrates this standard model and the significant relationships they found.
Those all seem quite intuitive, maybe, but it's valuable to see the research confirm them when we observe changes over time. What about the idea that having very few demands might lead to engagement, like maybe a super laid-back, easy job?
That's hypothesis D. Interestingly, the meta-analysis found that having low job demands over time does not significantly lead to an increase in work engagement.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It seems that engagement is more strongly driven by the presence of resources rather than just the absence of demands.
So a job that's completely devoid of challenges isn't necessarily going to make you feel engaged. You need those resources, the support, the autonomy, the growth to feel motivated and connected.
That seems to be the case based on this analysis.
Now, the JDR model has continued to develop, and there's been discussion about how our well-being might also influence our job characteristics over time, like a reciprocal relationship. What did this longitudinal analysis reveal on that front?
This is where it gets really interesting, I think. The meta-analysis examined this reciprocal model, where job characteristics affect well-being, and do well-being in turn affects job characteristics.
Okay, two-way street.
Exactly. And they found that this reciprocal model actually provided the best overall fit to the data compared to just the one-way model. Figure 4 in the paper shows this model.
So it's not just our job impacting us. Our levels of burnout and engagement can actually shape how we experience our jobs later on.
Exactly. They identified specific reciprocal effects. For example, they found that higher work engagement at one point in time predicts an increase in job resources later on.
How might that work?
Well, think about it. If you're feeling engaged, you might be more proactive, you might seek out support, ask for challenging assignments, or build better relationships, effectively generating more resources for yourself.
Ah, okay. Creating your own positive spiral.
Kind of. Conversely, higher burnout predicts an increase in job demands and a decrease in job resources over time.
Oh, wow. So burnout makes things worse.
It seems so. If you're feeling burnt out, you might perceive even normal tasks as more demanding, you might withdraw, and you might be less inclined or able to seek out or utilize available resources, leading to fewer resources later.
That's a powerful feedback loop. Feeling engaged helps you gain more resources, which in turn fuels more engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And burnout seems to create a negative cycle of feeling increasingly overwhelmed and unsupported.
Precisely. One interesting detail linked to hypothesis E was that work engagement didn't significantly predict job demands over time. It appears that burnout has a stronger influence on how we perceive and experience demands, perhaps.
Okay. And when they focused only on the higher quality studies, did these reciprocal relationships still hold up?
Yes, the general pattern of results was similar in the high-quality studies analysis, but with maybe some interesting nuances.
Such as?
For instance, they observed a higher level of stability in burnout over time in these studies, meaning if someone was experiencing burnout at one point, they were perhaps even more likely to be experiencing it later compared to the overall sample.
Okay, burnout can be quite persistent.
It seems so. They also found potentially a stronger reverse effect from burnout, leading to a decrease in job resources in the higher quality studies. Figure 5 in the paper illustrates these findings from just the high-quality studies.
Right. So what does all of this mean for you, our listener, as you navigate your own work life? What are the key takeaways from this deep dive into the JDR model and this longitudinal evidence?
Well, firstly, I think the JDR model offers a really valuable framework for understanding your own well-being at work. It really highlights the crucial role of both the demands placed upon you and the resources you have available to meet those demands.
So it's not just about how much work I have, right? But also about things like the support I receive, the level of autonomy I have, opportunities for growth, all those resource aspects.
Exactly. And the longitudinal findings really underscore that this isn't a static relationship. It evolved over time. So it's important to focus on both trying to maybe minimize excessive or hindering demands and actively seeking up and building up your job resources.
And the reciprocal aspect is also crucial, isn't it? My own level of engagement or burnout can actually influence my experience of my job down the road.
Absolutely. This points towards the potential for something called job crafting. Proactively making changes to your tasks, your relationships at work, or even how you perceive your job to better align it with your strengths and needs.
Right, taking some control.
Yeah. And even seemingly small effects observed over time in these studies can add up and become quite significant, especially when you consider how stable factors like burnout can be.
And it's a good reminder, too, that the quality of the research we look at really matters. Those well-designed longitudinal studies give us more confidence in the insights we gain.
That's right. Very important.
So, to sum up then, the JDR model gives us a powerful way to understand our well-being at work by looking at this interplay between job demands and resources.
Mm-hmm.
And this longitudinal research really emphasizes how these factors play out and influence each other over time, highlighting the potential for both positive and negative cycles.
That's a very well put summary. Captures it nicely.
Now, for a final thought to really chew on, listener. Considering this two-way street, this reciprocal nature between your job characteristics and your own well-being, what small proactive steps could you take in your job or maybe just in your approach to it that might set in motion a positive cycle of more resources and greater engagement? It's definitely something to think about.
That's an excellent question to consider. What levers can you pull?
We really encourage you to take a moment, maybe after this, to reflect on the job demands and resources in your own work life. What consistently drains your energy? What consistently energizes you and keeps you motivated? Perhaps this deep dive has given you some ideas about how you could cultivate more of those positive aspects, those resources, and maybe better manage some of the negative demands. You might even want to explore this idea of job crafting a little further online.
Understanding your work environment and how it impacts your well-being, your energy is a really important first step towards fostering greater engagement and, ultimately, a healthier and more fulfilling work life.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. Until our next exploration, keep learning and keep reflecting.